Coming up on the Sky News Daily with me, Mark Austin, as the US negotiates peace with Russia, can we still rely on America for our security? And if we can't, what happens now? Can we defend ourselves?
Donald Trump is heading back to the White House.
Together we can truly make America great again.
We are in for an unpredictable but fascinating 4 years.
And we're going to be following every twist and turn for the first 100 days. We'll be bringing you the latest updates and analysis first thing every morning. So join me, James Matthews.
Me, Martha Kellner.
And me, Mark Stone.
For Trump 100 every weekday at 6 a.m, wherever you get your podcasts.
Two big meetings of foreign leaders this week with two drastically different approaches to security in Europe. In Saudi Arabia, talks between Russia and the US aimed at ending what President Trump calls the ridiculous war in Ukraine. And in Paris, an emergency summit of European leaders to decide the cost they're willing to pay for Trump's desire to stop the war. Is America done with protecting Europe? And is this a wake-up call for Europe? A new world order? General Richard Shirreff was NATO's Deputy Supreme Allied Commander for Europe. So, General, can we trust America for our security anymore?
No, we can't. And it shouldn't be a surprise. What happened in Munich last week has been on the cards for years, frankly. And what Trump has done is brought us up short, brought the Europeans and Canada up short with the reality of it. What it has done is given perfect clarity to the current, to the new state of affairs. I mean, this should be no surprise to anybody that America has been saying for decades that Europe needs to step up to the mark. And meanwhile, the Europeans and Canada have carried on regardless, freeloading of American largesse, not funding their defense properly. And we've had 3 years of this war. The time to really get real was February 2022. And arguably, the time to really get real was when this war started at the beginning of 2014, in February.
But does this mean then, if America's not to stand behind its allies in the way it has done, are we not in a far more dangerous world, a world in which Vladimir Putin feels emboldened and less deterred?
Yes, providing, yes is the answer to that, unless Europe and Canada step up to the mark. And so today's meeting in Paris is critically important in that respect. What we should be seeing is, number one, a resounding signal from Europe and Canada that whatever Trump decides to talk about in Saudi Arabia, we will stand with Ukraine all the way. And there can be no proper peace without Ukraine. And number two, it's saying, right, America, you must do what you want to do, but we will now start the process and accelerate it of filling the gap that you are going to leave. Now that could take, a hell of a long time. It's a matter of a decade at least, I would have thought.
You are talking about a problem in Ukraine that could surface in terms of peacekeeping necessity and security guarantees that could surface in months. And yet, the spending hasn't been there. So we're not in any position really to give security guarantees to Ukraine, are we?
Let's first of all discuss what that means, and then let's look at what might be available to meet that need. The first requirement is that there's a peace to keep. And unless Ukraine is a part of this process and the Ukrainian needs are met, there won't be a peace to keep, because Ukraine, I don't think, is going to give up fighting if there is a stitch-up which just willy-nilly gives Russia all that it wants and Putin all that he wants. I think the second thing is the assumption that Russia will stop. I don't think Russia will stop unless Russia gets a seriously bloody nose in Ukraine. So if there is a Trump-Putin stitch-up that gives Putin what he wants, Putin will declare victory, Putin will regenerate and rebuild his armed forces, and when he's ready, he'll have another go.
On this point of the negotiations between Trump and Putin, you think, do you, that Europe and certainly Ukraine have to be part of all that?
Absolutely, fundamentally, yeah. And frankly, I would say Europe and Ukraine should be saying to Trump, you can do what you want. Just push off, frankly, because you can't do a deal over the heads of Ukraine, because there won't be a deal.
And on NATO itself, do you think NATO survives this as it is currently put together?
I think there have got to be some real questions about that. The fundamental principle that has underpinned the NATO alliance for over 70 years has been the doctrine of collective defense. As we all know, Article 5, armed attack on one is an attack on all. And America has underwritten that at its own expense. And as I said, the Europeans and Canada have effectively freeloaded off American largesse, knowing that America would never back down on that. Well, America has now backed down on that. So that does strike at the heart of the principle of collective defense. And I don't think it's going to change. So is America a reliable ally of NATO? I don't think it is. So the Europeans have got to look to themselves and come up with another construct that meets European security and defense needs against the long-term threat posed by Russia. And the only way that that long-term threat posed by Russia is going to be deterred is through effective military spending, military capability, and with cast iron security guarantees from Europe in Ukraine to defend Ukraine against Russia.
Is there a case for saying to the United States, look, what's happening? You're either in or you're out. What is it?
There is absolutely a case for saying that to the United States. But it starts with Europe and Canada demonstrating that they are ready and willing to take up the challenge in terms of filling the gap left by America. If Europe pontificates and wrings its hands and talks the good talk, but does nothing material, then any discussion with America is meaningless. If, on the other hand, America sees the major European military powers, if you might call them like that, like Britain and France and Germany, changing tack, changing policy, making the sacrifices necessary, then there is a chance that the NATO alliance can survive. If Europe does nothing except talk and wring its hands, then the NATO alliance will not survive.
Thanks very much indeed, Richard. After this short break, we'll have more on NATO and more on Europe's capacity and capability to defend itself.
Donald Trump is heading back to the White House.
Together we can truly make America great again.
We are in for an unpredictable but fascinating 4 years.
And we're going to be following every twist and turn for the first 100 days. We'll be bringing you the latest updates and analysis first thing every morning. So join me, James Matthews.
Me, Martha Kellner.
And me, Mark Stone.
For Trump 100, every weekday at 6 a.m, wherever you get your podcasts.
And General Richard Shirreff is still with us, and we're going to talk about the UK and Europe and its readiness to take on more of the security burdens internationally. And Richard, can Europe provide, for instance, a long-term peacekeeping force in Ukraine if it comes to that? And can the UK be a large part of that? Can the UK lead that?
Yes, is the answer. First, UK can absolutely lead it. And the one element of the UK armed forces that I think is fit for purpose is our command and control capability. I would highlight the capabilities of Headquarters Allied Rapid Reaction Corps, the ARC, a 3-star Corps headquarters, absolutely capable of taking under command contributions from across Europe to command this, together with the 3rd Division, probably as a 2-star fighting divisional headquarters. But what is lacking are the teeth, the sinews of war. the capabilities, the people, and this requires significant numbers of people. For example, if Britain was to sign up to providing some 10,000 troops for this, that would actually mean 30,000, because you've got to think in terms of not only those who are deployed, but those who are preparing to deploy to take over after 6 months or however long the tour length is, and those recovering and retraining after they've come back. So that's 30,000 back straight away. And to find that out of an army, a pitifully sized army of 70,000, is going to be one heck of an ask. And I don't think it could be done without mobilizing reserves.
So that was my next question. How credible is it for the Prime Minister to talk about deploying boots on the ground in Ukraine, given the current state of the army?
It would be credible if at the same time we are seeing a massive gear shift and investment in defense. And what I mean is a mobilization of the economy to prepare effectively to mobilize a war economy, to produce the ammunition, the equipment, the capabilities needed, together with a readiness and an announcement that the reserves would have to be mobilized in order to deal with this, together with a massive increase in defense spending. And then you ask, how long? Well, this is a long challenge. This is years. This isn't going to be over in a couple of months. This is years. This is a decade or so, I would say, of a presence in Ukraine, if not longer, because unless Russia changes fundamentally, it's never going to give up its intent to remove Ukraine from the map and incorporate it in Russia. So some form of peacekeeping implementation force could be needed for a very, very long time indeed.
Well, you're talking about a substantial change then. You're talking essentially about certainly the UK and other countries in Europe effectively being put on a war footing to come up with some industrial-based war plan.
I can't see how any implementation force seriously capable, and that means it's got to be ready to fight Russia, which means it's got to have the equipment, the artillery, the ammunition, the tanks, the drones, all the paraphernalia of 21st century conflict. It's got to be properly trained, it's got to be properly commanded, and it's got to be properly ready. I can't see how you do that without mobilizing the economy for war.
Does a European army make any sense to you?
A European army in the sense of a single institution under a sovereign authority, such as the British Army or the French Army under the French government or the British government, does not make sense. No, you don't need to do that. We're very used to combined multinational forces under the banner of NATO. We did it in Bosnia, we did it in Kosovo, and we're very effective at doing that sort of thing. So you don't need to form a European army and jump through hoops over institutions and what uniforms they're going to wear and all that sort of nonsense. No, but what you've got to do is make the best of what you've got.
How pivotal a moment do you think this is in terms of the UK's and Europe's security going forward?
It's absolutely pivotal. Munich 1938 not only betrayed Czechoslovakia, but the failure of that and the Nazi invasion when it took over the whole of Czechoslovakia made the British government wake up to the need to prepare for war. And it was that preparation for war, for example, putting in place an air defense cover for London, which just about ensured London didn't go under in 1940 and 41 during the Blitz. Munich 2025, equal betrayal potentially of Ukraine, appeasement of a dictator by Trump, effectively giving Putin what he wants in foreign policy terms, should set the conditions for preparing to avoid another world war. And the only way that can be done is through effective deterrence, effective defense, and that means extraordinary sacrifices from Western democracies.
Is this the United States saying that militarily, certainly, that the special relationship is over?
I'm afraid I think that cliche of the special relationship is no more than a self-serving cliche. It does not exist. America does what is right for America. Britain should be doing what is right for Britain and not slavishly adhering to a long, out-of-date cliche.
General Richard Shirreff, thank you very much indeed for joining us on this podcast. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
That's all we have time for today. Remember to follow the Sky News Daily wherever you get your podcasts, and every new episode will automatically appear on your feed. We'll be back tomorrow.
Donald Trump is heading back to the White House.
Together we can truly make America great again.
We are in for an unpredictable but fascinating 4 years.
And we're going to be following every twist and turn for the first 100 days. We'll be bringing you the latest updates and analysis first thing every morning. So join me, James Matthews.
Me, Martha Kellner.
And me, Mark Stone.
For Trump 100 every weekday at 6 a.m, wherever you get your podcasts.